Hello and welcome back to JLXP. I am Joshua Jatt Leesman for the Josh Leesman Experience. That's how it works. I realized at one episode I said, welcome to JLXP. I'm Jatt, and it was very confusing. But it is currently Wednesday, the 26th of February. I'm here with Kien once again. We're heading into week 6 of the LCS. We'll be going over your 10 thoughts, but also talking about some other fun stuff as we have done on this podcast so far. How you doing?
Doing well. Halfway through the split, feeling pretty good about it.
Yeah, it's good. And you started off your 10 thoughts this week with just saying, Cloud9 are the champions. And I did want to start there because it's really interesting because they're 10-0.
Yes.
And there was a moment in the spring split of 2018 where they were 8-0. Mm-hmm. And then they basically just flamed out for the rest of the split and didn't make any noise. They didn't even make it into top 4. Yeah. It seems unthinkable that this Cloud9 team aren't at least in the finals, likely the champions. But is there any doubt in the back of your head that maybe there's a collapse that could even think about happening?
No. I think with the other teams, it always felt like I remember that 2018 split. We were always pretty high still on Team Liquid that split. It was because they came out of the gate, they were kind of surprisingly good because I think a lot of people weren't sure how strong Double would be after he left TSM. A lot of people were also expecting TSM to still be very good coming into that split. And I don't remember Cloud9 being this dominant. Is very good, but it's this is a different. It's not just that they're undefeated. They're undefeated and they're winning every game in 28 minutes, 29 minutes, and they're crushing. It's you could I talked about a little bit. You blink and they're up 2K gold, even though they're only up a kill or something. It's really weird or impressive, really, how much they're able to generate leads in the beginning of the game from basically just tiny macro plays or tiny farming outplays. Yeah. It's been really interesting to see.
The last time we've had a team this dominant, I was going over this earlier in the week, the Spring Immortals team from 2016 went 12-0 before losing to CLG.
Yeah. And
in the summer split, even though it was best of 3, the TSM team was 14-0 before losing to Phoenix 1 in the best of 3 with the Inori Rengar game that went crazy. So those are the benchmarks for Cloud9 to have the best start in history. I wanted to go back just a little bit because we are halfway through the season. The Dive, which released yesterday, did first team and second team awards. Unanimous C9 first team. I think we can agree on that. We lead every episode with C9. I did want to get really quickly, we don't need to spend a whole bunch of time on it, but who would your mid-split second team all LCS be?
Okay, so I'm going to step you back real quick there. When you say we unanimously agree on the first team.
Are you putting PoE in mid?
I'm putting it, okay, so I was thinking about this.
Because in your article you were mentioning how PoE might be a dark horse for MVP.
So I was thinking about this, and I think if the season ended right now, there's a pretty good chance PoE wins MVP. If you were to do a full you were to do a full vote, and this isn't this isn't in the sense that I necessarily think he's MVP and that he's the best player in the best team, or even that he's the best player in the league. I'm just thinking about it from
how
a
the
gaming,
voting works.
Yeah, how the voting would work is I don't think we have a consensus on who the MVP is on Cloud9. I don't even think we have close to a consensus on that. I think you can make a strong case for pretty much everybody besides Vulcan, who hasn't won Player of the Week yet, which they keep memeing. Yeah. But I think aside from him, the other 4 all have good claims to that title, which means if you were to do an actual vote, then there's a decent chance PowerOfEvil just steals a bunch of second place votes.
Right, because everyone will say, Blabber's my MVP, and then PoE. Or Sven's my MVP, and then PoE, and then Vulcan.
And I just feel like it's unlikely for them to put 2 Cloud9 members. Just the way I'm thinking of how voting works and how my voting has worked in the past and how the ballots have panned out. And so if that is the case, I feel like if PowerOfEvil is my MVP candidate at the moment, and honestly, I might even personally stick him in the MVP slot, just strictly from a value perspective, in that he is more valuable, I think, to Flyquest than any individual member of Cloud9 is valuable to their team. And I think in that particular metric, I might have to I'm not glued to this idea.
Yeah.
But I do think you could make a strong case for PowerOfEvil. And if you just look at straight numbers, he's top across the board in a lot of major metrics. I don't think it's wild to suggest from an individual performance perspective that he deserves the first team mid laner. So
his stats last week, if we're doing what have you done for me lately, are pretty incredible.
He was player of the week,
13 kills, 2 deaths, 10 assists. 684 damage per minute, 40.2% of his team's damage. And then the really impressive one was he averaged 11.3 CS per minute.
That's crazy.
Because both of the games on his Orianna and his Corki, he hit 300 CS well before 30 minutes.
Yeah, I mean, he also had that, like, when I'm thinking of like MVP, I think MVP moments, and he had that Corki play, which was incredible. You know, just flies into the team and just demolishes them. And I'm sitting there, I'm just like, you know, I said I wasn't glued to this idea. I'm going to glue myself to this idea.
The more you talk about it, you're like, wow, PoE.
I'm slapping PowerOfEvil. That's my first team mid laner. Niski, sorry, number 2.
Oh man, I can't do it. I think you have a fair argument there because you do look at the rest of the team and the fact that it's the first place versus the second place team and how standout is that guy on the first place team. But as long as there's an undefeated team,
yes,
that also plays the way that C9 does, where clearly everyone is part of this well-oiled machine. I can't be like, oh yeah, but that, middle part is not as good as this PoE. Because I can't imagine. So he would be my counter argument. I don't think putting PoE into C9 makes them better, which is kind of like the first team. Like usually my first team is I'm looking at the individual performance of a player, but there's also a small part of it that says, hey, imagine what these 5 players would be. Yeah. This would be like the super team of the split. And right now, the super team is actually just, for me, the 5 starters of C9.
I think that's fair.
I'm glad you pushed us to actually define it, though, rather than just saying, oh, yeah, C9, they're the best. Let's go into the second team.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't stick PowerOfEvil on Cloud9 either. Like, definitely, you wouldn't change that roster at all. Just, I'm going to give my boy PowerOfEvil.
No, that's fair.
Nod there.
So, PoE is my second team mid laner. I had Broken Blade in top, Ignar in support. I think that's where we're going to agree, unless you have something else in top.
Ignar for sure. I have Ssumday in top.
Oh.
Yeah. I think Ssumday. So, are you familiar with WAR in baseball? It wins above replacements.
Yes.
Okay, so basically, I feel like 100 Thieves might be a one-win.
We can explain it. It's basically like this kind of this god stat. I'm familiar with it. I don't know what actually goes into it. But
I don't know the math behind
baseball is one of the most statistically analyzed games in existence, and it hit advanced stats before basketball did because it's much easier to isolate variables in baseball because every instance is, pitcher versus batter, and their sample size is so huge because they play 162. Yeah, 162 games in the regular season. So WAR is an acronym for wins above replacement, and essentially what it says is the average person in this position, just replace them with this player, and this is how many more wins your season will have. It is a cool stat in that way. So you have guys like Mike Trout, who's like the best player in baseball that no one knows about because Major League Baseball isn't on Twitter or any social media because they block everything.
There was a great article about that recently that talked about how, I forget somebody, it was John Boyce wrote this article about the top 10 most obscure players, and then Mike Trout was on it, not because he was like obscure, like top 10 obscure athletes of the last like 10 years.
Yeah.
And it wasn't because Trout was like necessarily obscure, but he's obscure relative to how good he is, because if you look at his numbers, there's an argument for him to be not just the best player in baseball,
like one of the best of all time.
Like all time, his numbers are like pacing on the same levels like a Babe Ruth, and that was when numbers were like a little, I don't know if inflated is right, but it's like a different era, right?
Yeah.
And so like Trout is that good, and I like half the people tuning in this podcast
will be like, who the F is Mike Trout?
I don't know if I could pick Mike Trout out of like a lineup. Like,
it's true.
And I know his name because I follow sports fairly closely.
Yeah, and I know it because I loosely follow baseball, and my dad sent me an article about Mike Trout. He's like, he's actually one of the best baseball players ever. Crazy that we get to see this. And I'm like, do we? Because
I don't think I've actually seen an Angels game. I don't think I've actually seen him play out. Like maybe a highlight somewhere, but it's like you said, it's hard to find highlights even on Twitter, right? Just the way baseball's media deals work.
Anyway, his wins above replacement in 2019 was 8.3.
That's crazy.
Which is like really high if you're actually trying to consider like you're going to win 8 more games just because you have Mike Trout versus an average guy. Yeah. So now we're on to Ssumday's WAR.
Yeah. And I don't
And this
know.
Is like an eye test WAR. I actually did this, but give me your point.
So I feel like again, like an eye test WAR, I can think of 2 games. There's the Aatrox game he played. I think that was against TSM. And then there's, of course, the Lucian game just recently. I don't know if they win those 2 games without him on those champions playing and doing what he did. And I feel like even the other 2 wins, you can look back and be like, well, if Ssumday's not in this game, then what happens? And I feel like, to me, his WAR is
2.
At least 2. And I just think he's very, like, without him, I don't know how, like, this 100 Thieves team is just a lot bleaker looking. Like, they could be sitting at, like, CLG level, in my opinion, without Ssumday. Of course, there's also the argument I think probably used last year, which is, like, maybe Ssumday draws too many resources, so we're going to try playing Fake God instead of him.
Right.
And I feel like, so, I mean, that's always that question, right? But to me, it's like when I see Ssumday pop off on these games, and there's definitely recency bias involved, having just watched that Lucian game where he just, like, completely demolished Haunter. I feel like even without recency bias, it just feels like he's so valuable to that team in terms of being, like, one of the few top laners in the league that the team is, like, building an actual game plan around and then also executing. And it's something we've seen from him in the past. So it's not like this is coming out of nowhere. He feels so individually talented that I feel like this is the guy that I want to credit just because he's, like, almost single-handedly keeping 100 Thieves in the playoff race.
Yeah, that was the attention-grabbing headline of your 10 thoughts. I'll jump ahead because your first line was the Guinness Book of World Records largest backpack in the world is 39 feet 9 inches, which means Ssumday is an absolute unit.
Sometimes I outdo myself, Jatt.
It's a good one, man. I have a counter to your Ssumday point.
Sure.
Because I was sitting in the caster room, like, while Ssumday was popping off and just, like, reading some of the comments. And, like, I agree, he popped off in a massive way. And I even have here, like, he has those 2 amazing games, the 7-0 Aatrox versus TL, where he solo killed him 3 times. Okay. He solo killed Impact 3 times. And then the 502 versus Haunter. But that was also his only win on Aatrox in 5 tries. And he's been ahead in CS at 15 in 5 out of 10 games. So he's been very average in the games where he hasn't popped off. So, like, it's this weird thing where I want to say Ssumday is really, really good while simultaneously being overrated is kind of the angle I want to come at here, because I'm still conflicted on this. You can tell I'm like working through it because you bring up the war thing, and when I look at the stats, I think, hey, if a top laner is the reason you're 4-2 or 4-6 rather than 2-8, yeah, I'll take it.
Yeah.
But for, like, second team, I'd say Broken Blade,
he's been very good,
has maybe given them more than 2 war. Like his Kiana game, his Ornn game. Just right off the top of my head, I didn't do the deep dive like I did on Ssumday because I did a Dragon deep dive for TSM, which we'll get into in a little bit. But yeah, that's why I have Broken Blade there, because the team seems to actually, it's a bigger part of their game plan.
Yeah.
To build around him, whereas the Ssumday thing is like this random thing that just happens in some games where he pops off. Like Ssumday's so much in his own world, whereas Broken Blade seems part of the team.
Yeah, I think that's a good kind of, like, certainly it's like a 1A, 1B thing for me when I was looking at these two, because especially if you look at, like, all those stat metrics across the board, like Broken Blade's, like, I think number 1 in a lot of major categories, and like and he had, like, the Kiana game in particular, I think is the one that you think of when you think of, like, nice pop-off games for top laners. But the Ornn game I think about a little less. Part of that's definitely bias against.
It's just bias against
Ornn.
Kumo.
I'm like, let's get Kumo. It's like Ornn. I'm like, I don't know. You can give somebody, you stick anybody on Ornn, they'll probably do all right. Of course, he did a little more than just all right in that game.
Ornn is definitely something that the more people have optimized around detonating Brittle, it's just, you're realizing how absurd it is to do 20% of their max health with a Brittle proc.
It's strong, man. Who's the one? Somebody got a solo kill this weekend with it. Just completely. It was like from 80%.
Yeah, I think it was Broken Blade.
Was it Broken Blade?
Yeah, it was on Kumo.
No, that was. It was nice. It was nasty to see.
Okay, so top lane's done. Jungle.
Jungle's Dardoch.
I have Dardoch. Nice. Yeah. We agreed.
I mean, I think you've been hyping Dardoch. I think you're the one that kind of
I've gotten in your head.
One.
Yeah.
So I'm watching it. I'm like, there've been a few games where like he kind of not. I don't think he's that great of a team fighter down the stretch, but I don't feel like that's his fault necessarily. I feel like TSM as a whole has a lot of has a big mess to solve when it comes to like mid-late game stuff, and team fighting being one of those key metrics for how you define how good a late and mid-game team is. But in terms of early game, I was looking. I think he has a 70% first blood rate, so that's. I mean, that puts him number 1 in the league, and I think that's right in line with what we've been seeing from TSM, is that they've had a very, very good early game, and Dardoch's been very critical to that. And to me, when I'm thinking of junglers and what they need to do in pro play, like for me, the quintessential jungler is somebody who can get your team rolling early, so that you don't just fall over. And like I think that's a huge problem we've had internationally over the years. Is sometimes NA teams go and they just get like shit on in the laning phase, and they don't even have a chance to play their mid game macro, which is like where TL was always the best. Yeah, and I feel like when I see a jungler consistently put their team in that, like, not just like even states, but like advantageous states in the early game, that's exactly what you want out of a jungler. And Dardoch's been extremely impressive at doing that.
Yeah, you don't need to tell me twice. Yeah. I think he's been crushing. Who's your AD carry? I have one that might be a little strange as we close out the second team.
AD was a weird, and then
because there's Sven and then there's the field.
It's a pretty wide field. I had to spend a lot of time thinking about this.
So the way I approached it is I did a little bit more stat driven.
Yes.
And I kind of threw out the speculation of what they're like behind the scenes and just look at what I've observed on field.
Yeah.
So this is why I have Bang.
Yep.
Because for those of you who missed it, there were a couple of player interviews, the stuff that is kind of done in like the back room on camera that shows on broadcast. We call them SOTs, sound on tape. But one of them was Zazel talking about some of the difficulties they have with the team and there was a good analyst desk segment on this as well, where Bang has an idea of the way he wants to play, and if the team doesn't listen to it, he'll like run it down. Like a little bit, not that extreme, but he will just do his thing anyway, almost to just tell the team like, yo, you need to listen to me, otherwise this happens.
But at the point, it basically is running it down because I feel like at that level, even just a tiny thing when you disagree is like that creates such a huge rift in your team and what you're trying to do.
And then there was also an interview where Bang mentioned like, oh yeah, I can't control everyone's team, right? So I think there's definitely a little bit of bad stuff going on behind the scenes, but his actual AD carry play has been pretty immaculate. Second best KDA amongst all AD carries, highest damage per minute of all AD carries, including Sven.
Yep.
So in those ways, Bang has actually been having a big bounce back split from last year.
And he's never I was between Bang and Kobbe for me because I was just thinking of like outside of Sven, who is the AD that just hasn't like done anything to cost their team a game? And I feel like Kobbe and Bang have both been very good at not costing their team games, but except Bang I think has been a little better when it comes to like winning his team games, like beyond just like being there.
Yeah.
And it just like the Ezreal game particularly, he had like a 7-kill game. He was hitting a ton of skill shots. I think it's games like that you see and you say, oh, this guy is still very good, but it's not his fault that the team isn't going out there because he's never been like an Uzi type player who's going to force a 1v3 in the side lane and then win it, and then then he has a highlight reel. He's always been just like extremely reliable. Even on SKT, there were times when he was their best performing player. Throughout 2017, even 28, there were a few splits where he was like, Bang.
It's like, this is the Bang show.
Yeah, he's their best player. They played around him, and it's not his fault that he plays a role. Which and this is maybe like you can question it, but I don't think AD has that much agency when it comes to like, hey, this AD is gonna go win the game for you. Like late game, they can 1v5 a fight, but they don't really start the fight, right? You still need your team to start the fight. Sometimes they get caught out. Sometimes Suzuki goes in, makes some weird play, and you're at 4v5. You can't win those fights, and I just feel like if you set Bang in a position where it's a fair 5v5, you get a nice engage off. I feel like he's almost always going to do more damage than the opposing AD carry if you can build the wall properly in front of him.
Yeah, I mean, the way you described it just there, it is somewhat similar to like a great running back in football.
Yeah.
You can have the best running back, but if your offensive line sucks, it's not going anywhere.
Unless you're Barry Sanders, and then you retire after 10
And even
years.
then, right, like you're going to do a lot of work, but you're not going to win a title.
Yeah, I mean,
right?
That's the same issue that's plagued Uzi for years, right?
Yeah.
It's he's very good.
And that whole team, to extend the analogy, like Uzi's team is a running team.
Yes.
Like they build everything to put all the stuff here, and Xiaohu's blocking for him, and the junglers are coming through and warding in the right way, and they're just creating so he can go to work. But you can't do it without all that creation. Whereas sometimes from a mid laner, well, yes, it is a team sport, and there's a certain level of blocking everyone has to do. There's definitely more agency in there. Like I totally agree with that.
And EG they're not built to support Bang in the way that he might necessarily wants to be, and I think that's something.
Yeah, and I don't even know if EG wants to build that way.
Yeah,
right. When they bring in Jizuke and have that craziness in the mid lane.
No, at this point, I'd be questioning what is EG like. They don't have an identity. What are they trying to build? And so that's a question I would like to approach.
Yeah.
So one of the things I talked to you briefly before today when we were just thinking about how we want to talk was I was saying as we're I don't know when the trade deadline actually is. I think it's after week 6.
we should know this. I know there's definitely a trade deadline in summer split, like 100%, because you need to do a certain type of roster lock before Worlds.
Oh, before Worlds.
I don't know if the same thing.
There might not be one in spring, then.
Yeah, there might not be one in spring. I think there'll be like a playoff roster lock where you can't switch your team before an international event, but I don't know if that exists in spring.
Yeah, so anyway, I was thinking, like, whether there is or isn't.
Yeah,
there's always
just a fun hypothetical.
Yeah, like, so we just passed the trade deadline in the NBA, for example. And so around the trade deadline, we always have people asking, okay, so what are people like to predict? What are some trades? And while we don't really have that many trades in League of Legends as a whole, but I'm kind of curious from your perspective, have you had to make one trade to improve both teams? So you can't just like improve one team.
So we got two teams.
Yeah, and it's not like sports where you can like you trade assets away and you get draft picks, you like kind of tank the year. In this case, you can do 3 teams if you have like a multi-way trade, but what is the trade you would make to instantly improve 2 teams?
So basically, the theory you have to go by is here is a player on a team who's doing very well, but the team isn't necessarily able to support him well.
Yes.
There's something here. Ssumday's too big of an asset, but there's something here with like Ssumday Jizuke or something, but maybe that doesn't jive. Do you have one?
Okay, so mine is
for me to think.
Mine is simple. So it does involve Jizuke, and so what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna trade Jizuke for Pole Belter, and I think. Wait, is that? Yeah. If I trade,
you're trading mid laners, so you're getting more reliability on EG's mid lane.
But I also think you could do the same trade. No, it has to be Jizuke for Pole Belter, because I think what happens is Jizuke right now is a player who's gonna pop off and win you. Like I don't think CLG's 1-9 if they have Jizuke, simply because Jizuke is gonna go out and do a couple. Like there's gonna be a few games where he pops, even if he ints. But if he ints, they're gonna lose anyway. Like they're already losing.
Right.
So if you're gonna have a player, like if you want a wild card just to get a couple more wins, I'm not saying it makes them a good team, but it makes them a better team in the sense that they get a couple more wins. They're gonna be a worse team on like when he rolls, when he low rolls. They're gonna be just awful. But those games where he high rolls, CLG gets a couple extra wins.
Yeah,
overall
he'll high roll a LeBlanc game or two.
And then if you stick Pole Belter on EG, and I'm thinking, like, he of course had a rough weekend, but I think any CLG players having a rough weekend at the moment. But I'm just thinking Pole Belter.
They played the top 2 teams in the league.
Yeah, exactly. Pole Belter, as we think of him and his reliability in the mid lane, if you bring back 2019 summer Pole Belter, even any Pole Belter from before the last 2 games, and you stick him on this EG roster, I think you have a much more reliable mid laner, which is exactly what they really need. Is they want somebody in mid lane who is like plays like wave control, can control, like doesn't do anything crazy, and I think Pole Belter is very good at playing with his jungler, and I think him and Svenskeren could make a much more consistent tandem that then lets Kumo have some stability in the top lane to hopefully also deliver more consistent performances. And I think both of them together just play a much better front to back style and I think they serve as the wall that I was mentioning earlier for Bang. And that is my immediate improve to both teams. I actually think EG potentially is a contender if you have a much more consistent style from your mid laner. Like the game we saw from the Malzahar game from Jizuke is exactly what I think of when I think of like what kind of mid laner you need, like the mid laner that is basically Malzahar incarnate, and I think that's basically what Pole Belter can be.
I like it. I think both teams would have a chance of improving their win rates with that.
Right there.
Good job. You had the thoughts here. This is a half-baked trade that I have.
Okay.
So in a sense, I know for many reasons why this would never happen. But it's a nice what if. What if you traded Aphromoo and Bauerfrost? So the pitch here would be that Dignitas kind of needs to play around Huni or around Froggen, and Biofrost traditionally has been a very solid laning support. And Team Solo Mid, I have very conflicting ideas about this that we'll get into. I think could benefit from like a peak Aphromoo mid to late game shot calling presence.
Okay, so that's the caveat. This we're talking peak shot calling.
Yeah, and I don't know if we're there at this point, and I don't think or know if it would ever work with the like Bjergsen, Dardoch, Broken Blade triumvirate they have kind of going up there right now. But that's why this is half baked.
Yeah.
But that would be, if that trade happened, Man, that would be like podcast for hours.
Yeah, and I mean that is a great Madden trade where in Madden you don't look at personalities, you just look at their numbers. And so Aframu has good shot calling numbers. You stick him on that team. That makes sense to me from a purely like number perspective.
Nice. Did you have one more, or should we start getting into some of the games from this upcoming weekend?
No, that was the other thing I wanted.
That was your hypothetical?
The other hypothetical I kind of wanted to talk about is my parlay bet.
You had a parlay thing that you haven't necessarily told me yet, but what do you got?
Okay, so the parlay bet is essentially for people who aren't crazy people who don't gamble.
Yeah.
So a parlay bet that happens in sports. Basically, you need to have each of the scenarios pan out.
Yeah. You have to hit all of them in order to win.
Yeah. So you pick like 4 different scenarios. You'll say like the Titans will win by 10 points, and then LeBron will drop 50 points. And so you have to pick a couple, and the more parlays you add, the higher the payout is.
Yeah.
Right. And so I'm going to give you a parlay bet, and I'm going to give you 5 choices you can pick from. And you can pick 2 or 3 depending on how risky you would like to be with your bet.
Okay.
And so the 5 I've kind of isolated are 1, Cloud9 wins out the LCS Spring Split.
Okay, Cloud9 goes 18-0.
2, Golden Guardians finish top 5, which means they can't just sneak into the playoffs. They have to actually be in there.
Can't be 6th
above somebody. 3 is Team Liquid finishes 2nd, which means it's not win, but they have to like make a run here at it. 4 is CLG loses out and finishes at 1 win. And then 5 is PowerOfEvil wins MVP.
Okay, so the minimum I can pick is 2, because I don't think 3 of these are happening. Going 18-0 is still maybe more likely than a lot of those other things.
That's kind of crazy, isn't it?
Yeah, it is with the way I'm currently feeling. And they have 8 games left. They've already done 10. Yeah. Like going 8-0 is not it's no longer going 18-0. It's going 8-0.
I mean, so like especially compared to GG making 5th place, right? So
and it's also COG going 0-8. I actually think it's less likely that COG goes 0-8 than it is that C9 goes 8-0, because I think Pobelter is enough of an improvement that they're going to win a couple games.
Yep. And for Golden Guardians at 5th, you would have to say that, okay, they probably need to win about 6 games. And so what are you more confident in? C9 winning 8 games or GG winning 6 games going down the stretch?
And if I'm confident that C9 is going to win out, then I'm not confident the PoE is going to win MVP.
Okay, so
because you can't have those are 2 you should never parlay.
You should put but I might put those 2 together. But.
Just because you like losing parlays, apparently. And because you're gonna rig the vote. You're gonna make sure you vote PoE number 1.
I have a vote. I control my destiny.
Yeah. I do too, but I did not control that last year. So last year I did not think that Svenskeren should have won MVP. So normally, like your scenario of, what people will do is they'll pick their guy on TL, then they'll pick Svenskeren, then they'll pick the other guy on TL, because it was between Doublelift and Core JJ and they split votes from each other. So I said, no, Doublelift 1, Core JJ 2, Svenskeren 3.
I think I had...
And then Svenskeren still won.
I think I either had that or I had Core Doublelift, because I also didn't think Svenskeren deserved MVP. I didn't feel like somebody who's sharing time deserves MVP.
Yeah, there we go. Okay, we're...
in alignment.
We've talked about that before.
Retroactive.
Okay, so the 2 I'm going to pick is C9 wins out.
Okay.
I don't think Golden Guardians is actually going to be top 5. But it like playing odds, I think that would be a better one. Mm-hmm. And then TL is currently 3 games out of 2nd with Flyquest, who even this coming week have a big test. They have C9 Dig.
Yep. There's
that little... It's a schedule this coming week that wouldn't be possible without 3 days of LCS, because C9 Dig Flyquest all play each other.
Yeah.
Flyquest might go 0-2.
Yeah.
If that happens, and if TL is able to pull out a win against TSM, they're like basically, they have a chance to be 1 game back of 2nd with 6 to go.
This parlay bet becomes much easier next week to decide.
Oh yeah. So right now, I will say the 2 most likely between C9 winning out, Golden Guardians finishing top 5, Team Liquid finishing number 2, COG losing everything else, and PoE winning MVP, C9 winning out, and TL finishing 2nd.
Okay, I think that's probably...
Final answer.
I think that's the one I would probably have to take well.
And if you gave me like amazing odds, I'll throw in GG makes playoffs.
Oh, okay. It's top 5, not just make playoffs.
Oh, geez. Sure, but with enough odds, that's the next most likely.
So the least likely one to you is what?
PoE winning MVP. No, CLG finishing with 1 win is least likely.
I don't see that. There's no way they lose out, right? Can't be that.
CLG. There's only 8 left.
I mean, there's just so many teams in the league that aren't good.
Yeah, they'll win one.
They have to.
They've been so close to winning more than one. The Immortals game where they just left their doors open. You're not going to do that again.
You would think so, but that's my parlay.
Did you have the same, or were you just came up with them thinking they're all equal and you wanted to get my thoughts?
I want to get your thoughts, but honestly, if I were to actually bet, I might actually do C9 wins that with PowerOfEvil MVP because I feel like that would give me really good betting odds in terms of what the payout would be, and I think my theory might pan out of PowerOfEvil. Like if they finish, let's say 14 wins. Which is pretty unlikely. They'd have to go 7-1 to end the season. Yeah, which is pretty unlikely. But if let's say they win out or they go 7-1 to end the season, which like they lose just to Cloud9 and nobody else.
Yeah, then they're only at 11 wins.
Then
because they're at 4 now, right?
No, Flyquest.
Oh, sorry, I thought you were talking about TL.
No, so they'd be at 14-4, which would be good for second place. PowerOfEvil continues his numbers. There's a world in which enough people put him high enough. Yeah,
like a 16-2 C9 and a 14-4 Flyquest. Yeah. Hey.
Well, if I'm doing the parlay, that means C9's 18-0, right?
Oh.
Yeah, so in that situation, it is hard to imagine somebody not winning it from the 18-0 team, but my theory is the votes get split. Yeah. I'm sticking with it. And I'm going to say that's what my parlay would be. I got to ride my horse, you know.
The Steve Nash MVP with Shaq and Kobbe splitting votes.
Yeah, it's one of those, it's like you almost put an asterisk on it.
Oh, man. Okay. Nice. That's fun. We'll be able to check back on that in 5 weeks once the MVP votes come in. Really quickly, I wanted to tease something, actually. So in your article, in your C9 section, you mentioned the support items event on Senna. I have been doing the support item Senna since launch.
Oh, no.
I did it a little differently. I would do double support items. I don't think it's as good as what C9 ended up doing because they can actually CS at a high level. The plug I wanted to do actually is I'll be recording a Senna podcast with August, the champion designer of Senna.
Very nice.
And we're going to talk a little bit about like his thoughts on how you optimize Senna, my thoughts on how you optimize Senna, what you've seen in pro play. It's going to be cool. But the really quick thing I'll say now about Senna is just doing the math on gold value of a soul, they probably should have been doing this sooner.
Yep.
Because you can get roughly 54 gold per soul based on the fact that it gives you AD and crit chance, and especially the fact that it's a guaranteed drop on cannon CS when the enemy support does it without Targons, which is why the double support item doesn't work. And the fact that there's a guaranteed soul drop on jungle monsters. And whenever Sven was rotating, he was like rotating with Blabber. So he was just mega soul farming. So he had like over 100 souls by 20 minutes.
Yeah, it was crazy.
And that's when Senna just gets completely nuts because if you think about, if you're getting 5,400 gold value in AD and crit chance, and this isn't even counting the range, from 100 souls by 20 minutes, that is... you are scaling more off your souls than you can scale off of items. And the powerful thing about it is if you can actually give that gold to someone else, you're just generating gold.
Yeah.
Right? Which is what wasn't happening with AD Carry Senna because AD Carry Senna was taking the gold and then also taking a few souls, effectively just losing out on all this value where Senna actually benefits when other people CS. So they're giving a conduit for the other CS, and that's like the theory behind why I think it's really good.
I mean, would you like? I was looking at that game, and like I mentioned here, I was actually because I wasn't paying attention like 100% because I had something else on my other screen. Then I glanced up, and I literally thought it was a visual bug when I saw it happen. To the point like I had Slack open, I was ready to like just DM
like,
somebody.
CS is too low.
Yeah, I was like, yo, there's a visual bug right now. I was about to tag the challenge, look like a complete dumbass.
Yeah.
But I'm kind of curious when you look at the game, you look at the numbers behind it. Is there why would you is that not just instantly top priority in terms of like why is there is there another pick that you would prioritize over Senna at the moment then if this is so that good? It
is very good, but it is still conditional because your Like wave clear isn't necessarily as good. Like you have to play around it. You're not going to be able to shove as well. Your tempo on swaps is going to be slower. When you pull it off, I think it's strong because it can work with more than just TK. TK is kind of the pro pick because Senna generally needs peel. I kind of have a theory that Senna will work best with melees always.
Yeah.
So Senna Ornn, Senna Galio, Senna Tom Kent, Senna Nautilus, Senna Taric. Literally just because of how the Q works. It is a line heal that does damage, and if you have a range support, you're not getting both.
Yeah.
So when literally on launch day, I went with my buddy, we did Senna Nautilus, Nautilus Farms. Really effective. In Pro, you're not going to have enough peel for the Senna, and maybe it's not going to be as effective, but like it's a kill lane, Senna Nautilus. So...
I mean, you said Senna Ornn. That just got me thinking. That sounds like dirtiest.
Yeah. People, so NA Academy was on this as well as a few like Challenger solo queue players because NA Academy played Senna Ornn. It lost. Senna Galio was actually Dignitas Academy's first loss.
Oh.
Yeah. So.
Galio.
Yeah. It's okay.
They kind of hinted.
Yeah. It wasn't amazing. I think like Tom Kent was banned or something. Senna Taric could obviously work in the same way Senna Taric could work. I think we'll end up seeing more of it, but I think it's cool because it is it's a different expression of the way bot lane or the game works, and it's pretty unique to Senna.
Yeah, I'm just the more you talk about it, the more I'm like starting to theory craft in my head a little bit.
Yeah.
I think most of this is more for solo queue, but I'm thinking like what melee so the problem with a lot of melee champs is they struggle to get farm.
Yeah.
They'd be sticking like a solo lane or something. And it just makes me wonder if like if Senna ends up becoming like a support of sorts.
Yeah.
To like say you stick Pantheon bottom or any like melee carry like a Tryndamere or something. Like that's your solo queue.
Here's a clash strat or a flex queue strat. This isn't gonna work. I'd be curious if you had the players to do something like Senna Yasuo with an Ivern jungle.
Yeah.
So like you're creating 2 carries in the bottom lane, but then your actual peel support is your jungler.
Yeah.
And Yasuo Ivern have insane synergy because of the way Q works, shooting Yasuo to melee range and the fact that Daisy has knockups.
Yeah. I mean, then you could have like Soraka top or something like control.
Then you get really goofy.
Yeah. Some weird interesting things you can do.
Yeah. In terms of pro play, though, you need the peel support for Senna. And I wanted to do the quick plug because I think that's going to release on Tuesday of next week, even though we're recording it on Friday morning.
Yeah, tune in. August is a really interesting person, too, I think.
Yeah, he streams. He's the designer of, like, Vi, Jhin, Jinx, Senna, Gnar.
Actually, that is just a panel of really, like, fantastic champions.
Yeah, it'll be a fun conversation. Moving on to the Flyquest C9 Dignitas week we have.
Yes.
We'll dive in a little bit more to Flyquest because you say, so if Fly can knock down C9 here, then we can officially shift the goalpost from are they good to how good are they?
Yeah.
I agree, but what if they just get blasted by C9?
I mean, so then the question remains, like, we shift the goalposts from how good to them, how good are they, to how bad are they? You know?
Right?
So we move the other
Is that actually what happens? Because everyone loses to C9, but we have this showdown, first game of the week, basically, C9 versus Flyquest.
I mean, it's like, I look over at Europe sometimes. I'm like, man, they have so many matchups. They're like, oh, this is the marquee matchup of the week. I think they got 4 teams at 7-3 over there.
They do, and then 2 teams at 6-4.
Yeah, so it's like they have they have a ton of great looking teams. And I look at NA and I'm like, oh shit, we got Cloud9. And then a bunch of teams that I'm just not that like. Well, I say this when I say, okay, if they can knock them off. But I said this literally about TSM when it was 4-2 TSM versus 6-0 Cloud9. I was like, oh, TSM. And that's the question you have to be prepared for when you go into the matchup. Because I don't think we can just sit here and be like, oh yeah, this is gonna be shit matchup. Cloud9's just gonna roll over them. Even if like honestly, I think that's what's probably gonna happen.
I mean, weirdly in the LEC, one of the things that's making it more compelling is the fact that G2 isn't playing well.
Yeah,
because they would have the same thing. It's like if G2 didn't drop games to Misfits, it's like, well, then you got G2 at 10-0, and then you got everyone else with 3 or 4 losses.
Yeah. And I'd like I said, we talked about the parody or whatever, but I don't think it's a bad thing. Like I love watching Cloud9 smash people. I love watching great teams just take a dump on everybody else because I think it's just I like watching high level play, and I think it's just fascinating to see a team just be this dominant. And going into the weekend, of course, I think. It's wild that the number 2 team in the league right now can be such a massive underdog to the number 1 team. But I feel like we don't have a like in sports. There's always like a what is you're expected to win by like the over underline.
Right.
Is you're expected to win by like, let's say 10.
Yeah, there's not a point spread in League of Legends games.
And maybe there's a gold spread, but even that feels like that doesn't always tell the story of the game, But I just feel like if they're like let's say this was a basketball game going into it, I would almost have C9 be like a 10, 15 point favorite, which is a huge spread in the NBA. And that is crazy to think about when it's the number 1 team versus the number 2 team in the league. And I think Flyquest has been, I wouldn't call them easily the second best team, but just the way they perform, they are the second best team in the league right now. And I don't know, it's just wild to think about what this disparity.
Yeah, and they can definitely change that narrative if they can show up in a big way against C9.
Yeah, if they come up, they don't even have to win. If they look good.
Yeah, if they make C9 go to 40 minutes. 40 minutes. If they get a Baron against C9. If they get their mid-turret.
if they get their mid-turret, we're pausing the game and just like, that's it.
Congratulations.
We're throwing like half a win onto Flyquest, and that's just going to be their final tally. That's going to be the tiebreaker the rest of the split.
Mid-game ceremony, you go and give them like a turret statue with C9's logo on it.
That's player of the week is Cloud9's mid lane turret. Like, oh god.
Moving on to TSM, because I wanted to dive in a little bit here. They're 6-4, another 2-0 week. They've had nothing but 2-0 and 0-2 weeks. You wrote here, like, if you look beyond the scoreline, because their EG game, it was an 8-1 scoreline, and the game never looked in danger of being lost. Yeah. But then you'll see they closed it out with a 50-50 Baron.
Yeah, I think you were casting that game, right?
I was casting that game, and I still don't know if I was too negative or if I was on the money.
I remember thinking about your call going into it, because you pointed out the 8-1 as the game ended.
Yeah.
But it was like, of course, I know you watched that Baron, and I know your face was probably like, some level of anguish.
What are they doing?
It was a terrible call, and I think that's something that you have to be like. They know this too, right? Like, there's no world in which you sit there. Like, I think the other jungle got into the pit and everything. It wasn't a situation in which it's like, oh, we have like Kalista even where you can force and just make sure the Ren secures it. There was no world in which they could have said, hey, we have like even a 60-40 chance at this.
They don't have a Malzahar or a Set or someone who can like suppress the other jungler to stop him from smiting.
Yeah, there's nothing. It was literally a 50-50, and then the smite just went in their favor. Like, that's not like, that's the type of play that I could see Dardoch being like, oh yeah, don't worry guys, trust my smite. But that's just not how the game works. And if you're sitting there and you're analyzing how you want to play this game, I'm happy we get the win, but I think you sit back and you say, this is not how we should be getting these wins, because that could have just as easily been a loss in a game. Like, it was a game that they had a stranglehold on it the whole time, right? And to force that play in that particular moment felt so desperate in a way that wasn't even necessary. Like, they didn't need to force that play in the moment right there. They could have taken more time with it. Yeah. And it just felt like one of those situations where maybe their past losses was creeping into their head, where they're like, oh, we've struggled with closing games out in the past, and the one way we know how to win is if we get Baron, it's really easy to close out. Like a monkey could close out a game with Baron. I think that kind of crept into their head a little bit and pressured them to make this play and secure the Baron, because that's the one way they know how to win the game. And I think that speaks to TSM's biggest issue as a whole, is they just don't have a good understanding of, or they're not able to execute properly on win conditions at the moment.
One thing that is interesting is their gold at 15 is second best in the league at plus 1,000. Their gold at 20 is 1,200. So like they get mid-game leads and they keep the lead at the same point without really extending it. The other thing that I am not going to be immediately negative on this, because I'm not someone who necessarily prescribes to the one true way to play League of Legends this early in the split. But I did a bit of a dive on their dragons and the way they play around dragons, and it matches up with some of my perceptions, and their evaluation of how powerful an early elemental dragon is way lower than other teams. So, as I just mentioned, they have essentially the second best early game in the league to C9 in terms of gold. But they have the third worst Drake percentage in the league at 38%. In fact, game by game, both of their wins last week, the other team had more Drakes than them. EG had 3 to their 1. Even the 100 Thieves win, 100 Thieves had 3 Drakes, and TSM had 2. And then you go to their loss, Flyquest had 6 Dragon Soul and 2 Elders to TSM's 1 in that really long game. But you can look at the way C9 wins and say, oh yeah, they just get a 22-minute Dragon Soul every game. Why don't you do that? Yeah. Or you can look at the way the LCK wins and everyone just sits around and farms around Dragon Souls. But the immediate power of a Drake is low.
Yeah, it's not good.
Until you convert a soul. And what TSM chooses to do is they go for something else while the other team puts time into Drake. And they're very consistent about it. Even the 50-50 Baron that they did, they technically had the setup, like they were there first and the other team had to approach kind of dangerously while EG picked up the third Drake, and then they're running after them, and then the game ended. So that wasn't clean, but I can definitely see what they're going for. They're saying, okay, we are going to lower our priority on early Drakes, and we're going to take the gold. Because when you go to Drake, we'll get a wave, we'll get a turret, we'll get a setup, we'll get something, and we don't need Dragon Soul to win the game. It's like, it's not even a consideration. And there will definitely be a point if TSM's overall goal is like mega international success or actually winning the LCS, that you need to be able to make those trades to actually break open even games. The thing that I don't like that is happening right now is TSM has a 5,000 gold lead, and then they are still making a trade for an additional 1,000 gold.
Yeah.
I want the team to be, if they're in that spot, just shut the other team out.
Just take everything.
Stop trading.
Yeah.
Just take. And they're not there yet, but like, this is why I don't want to be too critical of them, because I can see what's going on there, right? They're, like against C9, you're never going to be able, when TSM's beating C9, they're never going to be able, oh yeah, just take all 4 Drakes. Just go for it. No, you're going to have to make trade-offs. You're going to have to do 50-50 Barons. You're going to have to do these things to win against like elite teams. So that's the like glass 3/4 full on the TSM take.
Yeah.
The glass half empty though is, come on, like why does your Drake control suck?
Yeah, I mean,
but there's something conscious going on.
Yeah, I think that's a good way of looking at it, because like I agree, it's definitely deliberate at this point. It's like it's not like they're just being like, oh, we suck at taking dragons, we can't do it. You know, it's like I think your analysis is pretty spot on. I'm curious though when I look at that, and if that is the case, then you are limited. Like getting for the Dragon Soul and then getting Drake or Elder Drake is a win condition.
Yeah.
Right? And so that's one win condition that they're throwing out the window already, which leaves Baron as another win condition. And at the point you're basically tunneling on Baron, because they're also not like, I think when I think of win conditions in League of Legends, the other one I can think of that's kind of on that same level is, let's say you have a mega split pusher, like a Fiora, or somebody that can just 1v9 the side lane and just take all the inhibitors. Those are like the 3 major ways I see teams winning games. And they're not doing the split pushing really at the moment either, which leaves Baron as their one condition for winning. And but their setup around Baron is pretty awkward. And I don't know, I just feel like you're limiting yourself so hard when you're not contesting these dragons. It's a really, like, if it is deliberate, and it seems to be deliberate, it seems to be a very confusing, deliberate choice for me.
It's a choice that other teams aren't making as clearly, which makes it stand out. So I'm happy that there is a difference and that I can now track that difference.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. I think that's something anybody who's watching TSM should pay attention to. I think that's a really interesting observation you made there. The other win condition for them, of course, is Bjergsen, Laken, and Syndra. Seems to be
4-0, dude.
Seems to be pretty solid.
4-0 on Syndra, 2-4 on everything else.
I would be curious to see if they go back. If you go back,
and their priority keeps increasing. Like it used to be 4th pick. Now they're like, Syndra's open.
Just pick it.
Take it.
I'm just curious if whenever Syndra is in meta, like I wonder what TSM's win rate is, and I bet you it's generally like he's got to be one of the best Syndra players in the world.
Yeah, he has over 50 all-time LCS games on Syndra, and I think he's won like 39 of them.
Jeez, that's crazy.
Yeah.
So whenever Syndra's in meta, TSM does well. So I feel like that's what they really got. Like you get some TSM fans on call with August this week and get them to buff Syndra. You know.
Oh man. Yeah. So that's TSM. You have. I'm always confused about Immortals.
Yes.
And they had the 5-2 start. They're now 5-5, and you wrote in here that they haven't even looked good in those losses, and the theory for their success early on is that they were simply smarter than other teams and could win thanks to having better map play. The caveat, though, is that, like, what do you do now?
Yeah, I mean, it kind of reminds me of the Flyquest team in 2017 when Cloud9 Green came onto the scene. It was like, and High, Lemon, and Balls were just better than the other team when it came to like knowing how to win the game. They their mechanics slowly they caught up to them. Then if you remember that, but they kind of fizzled out down the stretch. They ended up making it the third, fourth place game, then they lost there. It was like, and that was the last we really saw of those guys being like good in the league. And I feel like this is a lot of similar markings to it. Is a team with a lot of like veteran players who have history of success. The mechanic part's kind of catching up to them. Ica's still not really turning up. Like when we were talking about AD carries who were second team All-Pro, if you rewind a couple of games, All-Tech's right in that conversation.
True.
I saw the stat. I think Chloe posted it internally saying that whenever All-Tech doesn't die, Immortals is undefeated.
Yep.
So he's another one of those like, hey, this is a very reliable. Like he hasn't really cost him games in the
hasn't
losses
cost him
either.
a single game.
And so he's kind of in that same level as like a Kobbe and that Bang. And I feel like if you really wanted to make a stretch for him, you could probably stick him in that second team All-Pro conversation. It's just that the last 3 games they've been steamrolled.
The thing I'll say though is yes, they have been steamrolled, but they haven't lost to an opponent that makes you go, oh man, I can't believe I lost to those guys. They've already played C9 twice. Only team to have to do that. Then they've lost to Dig, EG, and Flyquest.
Yeah.
Right? Generally, okay teams. EG is the only questionable one, and then they actually beat TSM. They beat TL, right? And then they beat 100 Thieves, Golden Guardians, and COG. And this week they play Golden Guardians and COG again.
They have a really easy week.
So yeah, exactly. They have been on the slide. This will be the week where it is the gut check of, is this Immortals team actually a playoff team, or did they just perform early and they are what we thought they were going into the season, which was a bottom tier team?
Yeah, I mean, to me it feels like this is my 7th team in the league at the moment.
Which, coming from 5-2, that's a fall. But the thing is, we're going to get on this podcast next week, and if Immortals is 7-5, we're going to have to say, you know what, they're in the playoffs.
I will apologize if they're 7-5 going next week. To me, when we say like they got an easy slate this week, I feel like we might look at hindsight and be like, oh, actually CLG and Golden Guardians had an easy slate this week because they got to play Immortals. And I feel like
that CLG game is what I got circled for CLG because the CLG 1-9 train, like I feel so bad for Paul Belter in the fact that he joins this team and plays the first, second, and third place team.
Yeah.
Back to back to back. His first game is against TSM. But then after they play Immortals. And I think that will be CLG's second win of the split.
So anybody making that parlay bet, you took CLG, this is the game that circled on your calendar, right?
Oh, man. I actually think that's mostly it, aside from the Golden Guardians, because I thought the brief moment in time with the Reddit post wondering if Goldenglue had parted ways with Golden Guardians was like a fascinating
it was fun. It was like,
NA League of Legends moment. Yeah. So for those of you who missed it, basically someone on Reddit went to Goldenglue's Twitter and was like, his back banner of his profile is blank and his description doesn't say mid laner for Golden Guardians.
Yep.
Is he even on this team? And he claimed in the Reddit post that it used to be Golden Guardians and that it had changed and everyone just believed him.
Yeah.
And there was an hour or two there where you're wondering if he was gone.
I believed him. I think a lot of us
and if a Blaze Olive was coming in.
We were all paying each other. We were like, this is kind of confusing. Like, he's actually looked decent, you know?
I thought about like reaching out to the Golden Guardians and be like, what's going on, guys? Because I wanted to know.
Because what happens, you have another like breaking news podcast where it's like whoever comes in, you know? Because part of me was sitting there, it's like, oh shit, did maybe Crown get signed by them or something? There's a lot of different scenarios that floated in my head.
Yeah.
And of course,
I even thought about the Crown thing. I was like, no, they couldn't because they'd have 3 imports.
Okay.
Yeah. But it was in the head.
It ended up being a hoax.
Yeah, it was a hoax. He claimed that it just hadn't been updated since he joined Golden Guardians.
Then he updated it to confirm that he's actually on T1 now.
Yeah, he made it T1. And yeah, I had a nice meme with Arrow, their coach, because as soon as Arrow was like, is Goldenglue even on Golden Guardians? I was like, oh, it's a hoax. It's over. Speaking of which, Arrow still has a profile picture of Echo Fox's 3rd, 4th place match in Miami. So is he even on Golden Guardians?
Who knows?
Yeah, there's no way of knowing.
We don't know if anybody's on any team anymore.
Team Liquid. Somehow we haven't talked about them despite them being such a big thing. So the difference, this is something that you and I think, have been softer on Team Liquid than the general community because...
I remain soft on them probably.
Yeah, I mean, it's just so hard to like really hardly criticize them.
They look so good when they win. And it's like when you see them get leads and they crush people when they get leads. Like they are so good at closing out games that I just feel like that, like... like you can fix all the other issues. I feel like it just, to me, they know how to play the map still, and I think that's a good benchmark for a team.
I think there is a big distinction to be made between Broxa coming in with 3 days of prep versus other teams who would have 3 or 15 days of prep at like the start of the split. If Broxa was here the Wednesday before LCS started and other teams had been here for 2 weeks, that would be a difference. But to have that 3 days of prep versus other teams who all have over a month of time together is actually very different. And it's something that hasn't necessarily been acknowledged, because I was brought into this Broxa hype like everyone else was.
Yeah.
They finally have Broxa. Yeah. And it just fell completely flat. Well, yeah.
Yep.
They've never played together ever, and all these other teams are in the mid-split form.
And you have to remember, like it's like, and I know that communication is a huge thing, and you have to remember Core JJ's second, like English is not his first language. It's not even Brox's first language, and I think that's something you have to keep in mind. It's like when you're looking for team synergy with a jungler, usually they're moving around the map with the support, and that's something we really haven't seen much from Team Liquid yet, and I think that's something that develops over time. Like I haven't seen a play what Broxa has made where I was like, wow, they like really coordinated and planned that out ahead of time. Like a lot of their dives and stuff even seems a little haphazard right now. Even that he had the pick on that where Afro just, I don't know what, he took awful pathing through mid lane and just immediately got insect kicked back. Like even a play like that, right, it almost seemed like TL was surprised by it too.
Yeah.
I mean Braxton just but how fast he executed it. Like if I'm Afro, even I can sit there. I could maybe see why I would do that route as well.
Yeah.
But Broxa capitalized on that so quick that it surprised I think everybody else in the game, and I think that's exactly why you bring in Broxa, is because he can do things like X-Smithy's not making that play. Broxa, like X-Smithy might not even be playing Leesman, but Broxa can make that play, and I think that's the kind of play that gets me excited about TL. I think they still have a chance of making a run for it.
Yeah, and if C9 Flyquest is like number one game of the weekend, TSM TL is 1A. Just for the storylines that are there. Like if TL is actually going to be a top regular season team before playoffs, it would have to start now.
Yeah, I mean, they can't afford losses anymore. They're already at 12 wins is their max at the moment. They lose another one, you're starting at 11, and it's 10.
Yeah,
it's like,
I still have a hard time imagining them not making playoffs just because of how condensed and how low everyone else's win totals are, since C9's taking everyone's record and putting it in the dumpster. But
who do they play? Who's the other team they play this week?
TSM and 100.
Okay, so I mean, so let's imagine this scenario is they lose to TSM, which is a fine scenario. Let's say they lose to TSM, which could happen. They go on the 100 Thieves game. Let's say they get invaded and they get a double kill. They lose the 2 kills at the beginning of the game. Are we looking at 4 and 8? Like, did we start panicking?
Right.
Because it's kind of fluky, right?
That's what you and I are not scared for TL, but I'm spooked. If that makes sense, because they've lowered their margin for error so much, which should put an inherent pressure on them. And there are, I don't want to come across like, oh yeah, TL is fine.
Yeah,
there are actually a lot of red flags.
Yep.
But it is one of those situations where like it's a flag. Like it's really not that.
Yeah.
It will be a big deal, and I will acknowledge it as a big deal after they fail.
Yeah.
And until they fail, it's not a big deal.
Man, I feel like
Double-Ifs bad laning, Broxa not having great early game, like Impact getting solo killed to Ssumday. There's a lot of stuff, like some of their drafts have been bad. There's a lot of stuff that you could say, oh no, but it's it's too hard to actually say no.
I'll take it one step further. I feel like they could fail, and we could start a podcast, and I'd still sit here and be like, yeah, let's say they literally just missed playoffs. We can start a podcast, and you might still see me sitting here and be like, yeah, I'm not that worried about it.
Wait for summer.
Yeah, I'm not that worried about them. They'll be fine.
Oh man, any final thoughts before we wrap up?
Final thoughts, because we have become half basketball podcast. I was curious, nice. Did you end up watching? And this is a more somber turn. Did you end up watching the memorial for Kobbe?
Oh, I watched some of the highlights. So I saw MJ's speech, I saw Shaq's speech, and I think I saw Beyonce's performance.
If you have an opportunity, Vanessa Bryant's eulogy
I
for
need to check that out. Yeah,
that wrecked me. So that is.
Oh no.
Like make sure you don't have any like immediate, like you don't have to be on air after watching this. It's because I was thinking about this, and I think that this is probably true for a lot of people our age and for our generation. And I was talking to Jeff about this. I feel like I've never been to a funeral. Like I think there was one when I was a kid. I barely remember it. I was like a toddler.
Okay.
And so in a lot of ways, this felt like a
funeral.
Like it's not like a it's not like your first prom, and like it's nothing to celebrate, but it was like kind of the first funeral I've really witnessed. Yeah, and it was a really somber moment for me. It just made me really think about, a lot of think about life a lot, and I feel like anybody who was a basketball fan over the years, if you're not even if you're not a basketball fan, I think it's a worthwhile watch. Just to catch it. It's a very human moment.
Yeah, I haven't seen the Vanessa Bryant speech, but I have consumed a lot of Kobbe content. So like, I was a Laker fan since I was 10 years old.
Yeah.
Right? Because it was the team that my dad and I watched. And I think for a lot of people, even if they weren't Laker fans or NBA fans, Kobbe's reach and his mentality and his brand was huge. And this ended up being one of the biggest celebrity deaths ever.
We have a caster named Kobbe 24.
Right? And so this is something that I did kind of want to say on the podcast, but I never necessarily found the right time. Yeah. When it happened, I held all of my emotions like inside, and I didn't acknowledge what a big deal it was for me until a couple of days later. But what ended up helping me deal with it the most was actually just talking about it with my dad, with my friends, letting myself get emotional, and just reminiscing. Like anything really ended up helping after the fact. So it's totally okay to cry about someone you've never met. Like it's completely fine. But Kobbe was such a big part of my childhood, of my relationship with my dad. It was all really big and important to me. So just talking about it and consuming content and those things ended up helping me a lot. So I wanted to just like mention that at some point on this podcast.
Yeah, I mean, it was definitely a moment of reckoning. Like Kobbe is his history, there's a ton of bad shit that happened. He had the rape case. There's a lot of good things that happened.
It's a very confusing legacy.
And then there's so much of it that I think you have to just grapple, but he was still such a big figure. And I think a lot of our lives is a very omnipresent figure in LA and in LA sports. Like he kind of transcended a lot of different things, and I think it's an interesting legacy to go back and just kind of like wrap yourself fully around it. And I think the memorial, which was like a beautiful, so it was I was crazy. It's like, most funerals, like Jeff was cracking a joke, but he was like, in case you were wondering, most funerals don't begin with Beyonce. And it was just like, it was that kind of thing.
Don't have Jordan giving a speech.
Did you see Jordan acknowledge the crying Jordan meme?
Yeah. God, that was the perfect. It was the perfect amount of humor in that moment.
God, it was so funny. And for those, I think most people have seen the crying Jordan meme at this point. If you haven't seen, like, Jordan goes up there and he actually acknowledges, and it felt like a moment where he's like, did he just kill his own meme? It was so funny.
He probably did. Yeah. In an amazing way. Like, Jordan is such a overly competitive person that gets like asshole, tribalized into this amazing thing. If people haven't watched, go listen to his Hall of Fame acceptance speech, because to me that is Jordan in a nutshell.
It's
the dude's
so petty.
Literally 45. He's 45, 46 or something, because he played until he was 40 and you can't get inducted for 5 more years. Yeah. So he's literally up in this Hall of Fame induction ceremony, and he like thanks everyone who basically ever doubted him. He's like, yeah, thanks for saying I couldn't do this, because then I beat you. And just that for 5 minutes.
Oh, it's
amazing.
amazing.
And then he even says like, yeah, I could still play. Like he's so competitive. God, even as he's 45.
I mean, that's like the double lift speech, It's so good. And just to see him up there and just be so like, because his whole speech was very emotional. Mm-hmm. He's like crying the whole time, and I've never seen Jordan talk about somebody else for that long. And it was like, it was a moment I think that really just kind of, the whole thing just kind of, it was a fitting end, I think, to this weird month for any NBA fan. So definitely that's my maybe I'll start recommending things to watch and read every week. And that's my thing.
I finally watched Parasite. It was good.
Oh, I'm glad you enjoyed it.
I don't want to give away any spoilers for people.
It was very surprising, right? It's like you just don't know what happens.
It was I really enjoyed it. Final thing on basketball, because I watched the Lakers play the Pelicans last night.
Oh,
LeBron put up like 40.
I think it's 42.
42.
Yeah.
And Zion is amazing. But the thing that I'm more impressed with this year than I have been in past years, because I've always been a huge LeBron fan, is how overpoweringly athletic he is at 35 years old.
It's insane. Somebody was saying
he bodied Jokic in the Denver game towards the end of the dude's like 300 pounds, and LeBron's this guy who can bring the ball up. Oh, and also guard like one of the most powerful guys in the league.
LeBron's not 16 straight years, 25 points per game or more. Insane.
Yeah. I guess that's it. Yeah.
Shout out to LeBron.
Yeah, he's incredibly athletic. He's like the oldest person in the league, and he's still blowing by people, and he's like a Shaq point guard. It's this weird.
He looks like he has 10 more years.
Is he like bigger than he has been in the past years? And almost he's using his size more than he used to, for sure.
It's like he's got that dad strength now. When you play basketball, like he's got a little old man game, throwing elbows, just using your body a bit more. It's
his
a little more
post game is like kind of unstoppable. It's a weird little tweak that he's done this year.
Very good.
Yeah. All right. Well, thanks for joining us on the Josh Leesman Experience. This is available on iTunes, Spotify, YouTube, Google Play. It's in a lot of places. The links are actually all available like in the YouTube description. We always link out to all the individual episodes if you want to just like follow those accounts to get updated, or you can follow YouTube or do any of those things. Keen, thanks for joining me.
Thanks for having me.